Hello, and welcome to chapter 13 of this Flutter course. In this chapter, we're going to talk about the login view. In chapter 12, as I can see here, sorry about that, we talked about the registration flow. And we actually talked about quite a lot of things, which after that, I thought maybe we need to kind of like go through them one more time, just every now and then talk about those little widgets that we talked about, like the future builder, center, column, text button, and we talked also about text field, text editing controller. So there were lots of components that we talked about, but we got pretty much like a simple registration flow working. It wasn't really a flow, actually. It was just a simple registration screen. I'm saying that it wasn't a flow because it was just a simple screen that didn't lead anywhere. That's usually what is called a flow if you have a screen that leads somewhere. Now, in this chapter, we're going to talk about the login view, and we're also going to divide the logic that we've created in our current homepage and put it into a registration view. So by the end of this chapter, we're going to have two views. One is for the registration, the other one is for the login. Okay. So as I've shown you here, we have those logic. I mean, the registration logic in place. Now we have to work on login, but we also work a little bit on cleaning up the code, because usually as you get more and more comfortable with software development, you'll know that you will have like these flows of ideas, and then you'll start coding and write your code, and then you test it, and then after a while you realize, oh, this got a little bit messy, I have to refactor the code. So that's what refactoring kind of means. Like, you take what is already there and you kind of make it better, make it cleaner, more presentable. So that's what we're also going to do in this chapter. So the first thing we need to do is to create a stateful register view widget. Okay. So as you can see here, this will be used as the base of our register view. So let me go and bring some stuff that we're going to need in this chapter. The first one is my strcpy. I'm going to bring it to the screen so you'll see it as well. And strcpy, we set it up in one of the previous chapters, so you should be comfortable with that already. Gonna go to our app here, which is the register view that we created. Gonna bring my face to the right so you'll see a bit more of the content on the screen. And then I'm also going to bring up Visual Studio Code, which is appearing on another screen right now, but I'll bring it up here so you'll see as well. I'm gonna increase the size a little bit as well so it becomes easier to see. So this is where we lift things. Let me bring up and do the screen like this. So this is where we lift things. We have a home page, which at the moment is the register view, okay? But we need to create a register view, like not just a home page, it's called a home page. So, and since we need a stateful widget, we're going to use a shortcut in Visual Studio Code to create a stateful widget for us, and that is with STF, as in stateful. So if you want to create a stateless widget, you'd say STL, okay? So STF. And in here, we're going to call it, what should we say? Register view, like that. All right. So this will be, as I've mentioned here, this will be the base of our, registration view. All the code for register will appear here. And I'm sorry that I'm looking here just to make sure that I'm basically going through my notes. I have very detailed notes here and just making sure that you get all the information that I plan for you to get. So if you see me looking here, it's just because I'm looking at the notes to ensure that. So now that we've created register view, at the moment it doesn't have anything, so it's just a container, and the default color for a container's background is black. So let's go to our register view here. Sorry, let's go to our main function here. And as you can see, at the moment, we're returning home page as the home. And what we're going to do here is just to say, instead of that, return register view. Okay. Command S, it's very possible we will get a problem here, and you can see nothing is changing because I'm changing something inside the main, and that isn't affected really by hot reload. So we have to hot restart. So I'm going to go hot restart here, and you can see now the screen is black. So that part is basically done. So what we'll have to do here now is to rename our homepage to our login view actually. So we have a new registration view, which we're going to write the code for, or actually place the code from the previous homepage into register view. And we also need the homepage to be renamed. So it's very simple. I mean, there's lots of renaming, putting things here and there, but we're just playing with some names basically here. So the next thing you need to do is to go to your homepage, which is here, and rename it. One way to do that in Visual Studio Code is to right click on it and just say rename symbol, or I believe it's also Command F2. Um, or actually, for me, it's F2. F2 does the renaming, but on a MacBook Pro, for instance, you can't just press F2 because F2 has another function. So what you'll need to do is to press function key on your keyboard and then press F2. That will bring up the rename dialog. Or you could just right click here and just say rename symbol, which does the same thing. So rename your homepage to login view. Okay. All right. So we have login view here now. I'm going to take it that we've done the rename. You see, right now, all we've been doing here is just to like write our code, write everything in main Dart. But this is not the right way of doing things. Especially as your projects get bigger, you need to make sure that you're taking the responsibility to also make sure that your code is readable and the structure of your project is understandable by others who may also be working on the same project. Now, chances are that if you're watching this course, that you will be the only person working on this source code. So you won't have anybody else looking at your code. Even though that you may be the only person looking at the code and working with it, you still will need to, from time and time, come back to the project, fix some stuff, add some stuff, remove some stuff. So even if you're the only person working with it, you will need a clean source code to look at. So if you come back to the source code after a month and you start to add more and more stuff to this main Dart file, after a while, it will just get out of control. So you'll need to also do refactoring on your code just to ensure that it is in a clean state. So what we're going to do is to bring up our project browser here. As you can see, we're inside lib, and then there's a file called main Dart. What we need to do here is to move our login view into its own file. And you can see here, I've written that we're going to move it into lib views login view. This file doesn't exist at the moment, so you'll need to create it. What you'll do here, I mean, in Visual Studio Code, there's a great trick that you can do that it can create a file and all the intermediate folders as well. So instead of going here and saying new folder to create this views folder, and then inside there create a login view, what you'll need to do, just say new file, and then type the entire path in there. So just say views and then /login view.dart. And this will create the views folder for you. So it's great. So what we'll need to do here is to take our login views code, as you can see here, as we had here, class login view, and then bring all that code into this new login view file that we just created. Okay, so I'm gonna get this out of the way here and just paste it. All right, and that's okay. We're getting a lot of errors here, and the reason behind that is, I mean, we haven't talked about import statements so much before, but import statement is a way for you as a programmer to bring in code written by others, whether it is the Flutter team at Google or whether it is a third-party dependency, and tell your Flutter project where those pieces of code are. And at the moment, I mean, if you're not coming from a software engineering background and you're not familiar with imports, this is, I mean, the closest analogy that I can find is as if, for instance, in Figma, you've created, you're trying to create an instance of a design that you've already created, but Figma doesn't know where that instance is. So you'll say, oh, here's a copy of the button instance. And then Figma is like, oh, where can I find that button? You haven't even created it. So then you need to first go create that button or drag it in from another project and put it in your components page. And then you can create an instance of it. So if you're not into design and Figma, you may not understand what I just said, but what I'm trying to do is just to be as inclusive as possible in this course to make sure anybody who's following this course will try to at least understand bits and pieces of what I'm saying. So going back to import, what we need to do now is to tell Flutter where those pieces of highlighted code are. And one thing to do in Visual Studio Code, which can help you greatly if you're trying to go around this writing things by hand, is just to do Command on Mac or Control on Linux and Windows. Hold down Command or Control, depending on your operating system, and press dot. Then you'll see suggestions here as where those components, those missing components may be placed. And what you'll need to do here is just to import package Flutter material, because that's where these components that we're using are actually placed. So, oops, I managed to click the wrong option there. So material, boom. All right, I think now almost everything has disappeared. Almost every error has disappeared except for these Firebase errors. So let's go and let's see. So let's go in there and say now Firebase core, import that. And also here we need to import my nodes Firebase options. Okay. So I think everything basically has disappeared except there's also Firebase auth. Import that as well. All right, so we're good to go now on this login view. However, remember, this login view's code really is not login view. I mean, if you remember the code that we've written in the previous chapter, this login view at the moment, it says login view, but all it does is register. Do you remember that? We had the text fields and even the button that says register. So what we need to do now is to drag the code, as you can see here, from the login view here. We need to kind of bring it into the register view, okay? And our register view at the moment is here, you see, there. So let's go and try to do that a little bit with care, okay? So grab all this code that is here in the login view, here, there, get dispose in its state, and also grab your email and password member variables from here and cut them. So I'm going to go then in here in the register view state, then paste those right before the build function. So there we go. Okay. We'll go back to login view Dart, and you can see that there is a build function here. And I'm going to literally just grab that entire build function, including the override. And as I can see here, the build function ends right there. And I'm going to cut that also, okay? And I'm going to go here and replace this override on the what is it called, register view, and paste that one from before here, okay? So all we did here is we made sure that the register view, it is indeed the register view, and the login view is empty at the moment. So what you'll need to do, you see there's an error here that says that, okay, you have a stateful widget for login, but it doesn't have any build function. So you'll now need to create that build function. And of course you could do it by hand, but it's, I mean, is not really that good of an idea to write all that code by hand. Of course, in the beginning, you may say that, oh, well, I just want to learn. The best way to learn is to type, and I completely understand that. But there are some things, like there are limits. I also believe, like, once you've done it once or twice, you'll kind of get bored of doing that, or you'll get tired of doing that. So I actually suggest that for these functions that you're overriding, the best way is actually to get your editor, text editor or IDE, to complete these things for you. So I'm going to go on this error and just say command dot on Mac and control dot on Linux and Windows, and say create one missing override, okay? And in here, we just say return. Okay, so that's our login view. And you can see here, now we have a register view that is right here. And then we also have a login view, all right? So let's go then in our main Dart file here. I can see that there's a register, and let's just actually restart this. Hot restart. Okay, so we have a register and our login view is completely empty. So now what we need to do basically is kind of like is kind of work on our login view, because this is like the goal of this chapter. We need to have a login view, and up until this point what we've been doing is kind of like create a register view with all the code in it and a separate login view, which was our previously created registry. So I mean, this is all a lot of talk just to say that we have a register view, but we don't have a login view, and we need to work on login view. So if you remember, um, I mean, you don't actually have to remember. You can look at it here. The register view has two fields: enter your email here, enter your password here. And the register view and login view are very similar to each other. What register view does differently is that it creates this. It basically does a call to Firebase that says create user with email and password. But if you think about it, everything else is very similar. Sorry about that. So you need to make sure in both of them that Firebase is initialized. You will have two text fields, email, password, and you will have a button, one for register and for one for login. So what we could do, to be honest with you, is to now go and copy this code that we got from our login view. Okay, that happens. I actually forgot that. So let's go and copy this code again from here, literally grab everything from there and put it in our login view like that, and change this register button to login. So now we have two copies of the same view. Basically, one says register, the other one says login. All right. So, and what we could do is now go to our main Dart file here. And instead of returning the register view, we could just return the login view, because we want to work on the login view now. Okay, we have a user registered, and now we need to work on login. And as a side note, if you followed the previous chapter, you'll know that we actually did register a valid user with Firebase. And what you could do is to go to your Firebase console, as we could do now, just an ad hoc. I hadn't planned for this, but what we could do, say console.firebasegoogle.com, ensure that you're logged in with your account. Then I'm going to go to this project that we created, my notes Flutter project. Go in there and then go into authentication, and you can actually then see the user that you created using the Flutter application that you're actually working on. So when you call this function in your register view, this function, Firebase auth instance create user with email and password, that user was indeed created in the Firebase console. So here you have a user. You could also disable this user and do other things, but we're just going to leave it like that for now. Okay. So what you need to do now is, instead of register view, tell your homepage to render the login view. And you could just type login view. And if you just type a login view like that, you will get an error, of course, because login view isn't in scope. But I believe Visual Studio Code could actually help with that, because you see, we haven't imported login view at all. So this main Dart file doesn't know what login view is. Exactly the same thing happened here. Do you remember? If we didn't have these imports, we got lots of errors saying that I don't know where this class is. So the same thing is happening in this main Dart file. All right. So I believe in Visual Studio Code, now I'm kind of improvising, but I think if you set login view and just press enter, boom, it does an import automatically for you. Let's see where it is here, you see. But if you're not comfortable doing that, just type login view by hand and do the same thing I showed you before, just command dot on Mac or control dot on Windows and Linux and say import. Okay, so it's going to import it for you. Now we have the login view, and if I press Command S, or actually we have to do a hot restart, you see now there is a login button right here, okay? So what we'll need to do is, as you can see in the caption, now that we're working on login view, go to your login view.dart and go here where the button is pressed. You see text button unpressed. What we'll need to do here is to call a new function on our Firebase auth instance. Instead of create user with email and password, we're going to say Firebase auth dot instance dot sign in with email and password. And you can see the function signature is very similar to create user with email and password, in that it takes two parameters, namely email and password, both of type string, And then what it does return, in fact, is user credential. And do you remember create user with email and password also return user credential? So it's very simple to switch between login and register in that sense. So grab the sign in with email and password name. That's the only thing we're interested in, and just paste it here instead of create user. Okay. So just gonna save that. For some reason my SCRCPY crashed, and I have no idea why. So that's okay. That wasn't planned. What we could do is to go to our, and I can see, you see it got unaborted. So what we could do is to go to our terminal, and I'm going to say SCRCPY. Okay. And I'm going to bring it to the screen here. So, and also if you noticed here, we have a login button, but the title here still says register. So let's go and fix that. Let's go into the app bar and just say login. All right. And actually, the problem is I can also see that my as SCRCPY crashed, also the running of this process, this application on that Android phone also crashed. So there is, I mean, the Flutter instance of this project isn't really running at the moment. So what I'll have to do is to go to main Dart and say run without debugging. So, and it's now launching, doing a Gradle build. Gradle, remember from the previous chapters, is for Android. And if it's using Xcode, it is for iOS. All right. So it's doing the Gradle build. So if everything goes according to the plan, then we should get a login title up there. And while this is doing its work, I'm going to go to my notes and just ensure that I've talked about the things that I promised I'm going to talk about. All right, it's installing our application. Going to remove the widget inspector. And now you can see we have a login on top, and that is working as expected. All right, so as you can see here, after the login call here, sign in with email and password, we're doing a print. Now, what we could do here is to enter some information of a user that doesn't exist. Okay, so I'm just going to say my personal email, and I'm going to say Firebase. And I'm then going to bring up the console here. As you'll see, the debug console, clear it. And I'm going to actually remove or do something like this so you can see the debug console a little bit better in its entirety. And I'm going to press the login button. All right. And then, sorry about that. So we have now the next thing that we need to handle. As you can see, I'll perhaps increase the size even more here so you'll see it better. When I press the login button, excuse me, using a user that doesn't exist, meaning that we haven't registered that user, then we got an error here that says Firebase auth user not found. And that makes sense actually completely, because we haven't actually done any registration for this user. Okay, so what we could do here is to go in here, and I'm gonna bring things back up kind of the way they were here. All right, so here we're recalling this function. Let me decrease the size because it's absolutely ginormous. In here, sign in with email and password. We need to handle a thing called an exception. And I don't think we talked about exceptions, to be honest with you, while I was teaching you about Dart. If you know about exceptions, you could just kind of skim through this little bit of the video. But if you're not a software developer from before, or software engineer, then you may not know what an exception is. An exception is when things go wrong and you haven't kind of thought about those things from the beginning. So for instance, if you're working with, if you're a designer or a product owner, haven't done software development before, you may have also used other pieces of software, and sometimes a software crashes, just like SCRCPY just crashed a few minutes ago. That is probably an exception or an error that the software developers who created SCRCPY hadn't counted with. So they hadn't counted with that an error might occur in this scenario, for instance. So not having handled that, the application crashes. It means that an exception happens, an error happens that the developers of that program hadn't accounted for. So, and this is an exception that you're seeing here in your Flutter application. So Firebase is saying that you're trying to log in with a user that doesn't exist. So what do you want to do with it? I can't continue after this. I don't know what to do. So the way to handle exceptions in Flutter or in Dart actually is using a try catch block. So I want to bring it here, put the entire code for your user credential creation in the try statement, as you can see here, and then go in here and say catch E in parentheses for now. All right, just like that. And then I'm just going to say something bad happened in single quotes. All right, so you can see here, now we have a try block as indicated here with this line. It's all the way from on top to here, and then we have a catch block. The way try catch works is that it, as its name indicates, it tries to do the work that you're saying it needs to be done in the try block. Should anything bad happen, it will go to various catch statements that you can then place after that try, okay? So as you saw in the logs, this error, let's see if we can find it here. It was of type Firebase auth. Let me see, unhandled exception, but we didn't actually get its type, unfortunately. So what we could do here is print something bad happened and then print the error itself. Okay. I'm just going to say clear the logs, Command S, and then I'm going to press the login again. Sorry, here. And you can see now it says something bad happened, Firebase auth, user not found, and then some information. And we could actually say print E runtime type, and doing that will actually give you information about which class of exception this is. Because you see, as you're working with Flutter and as you're working with software generally, you're creating software, you're writing code, different types of exceptions happen. And these exceptions have their own identity. Every exception has its own identity. It's the series of classes or different places that it may come from. In Dart, you can pretty much, anything can become an error. Even a text can become an error, or an enum can become an error. So when you come to this catch block, as I'll move my mouse over it, you can see that here it says, I don't even know what this is. This is an object. So it could be anything, but you are actually in your catch block, you're mostly interested in exceptions that might occur from Firebase. So since we don't really know what this type is, we're going to print it out to the console and we're going to have a look at what type it is. So let me do a little bit of how should I do this? Is this a little bit better arrangement, perhaps? So you can see what happens? Yeah, perhaps. Then what I'm going to do, Command S, hot reload, go here, press the login button, and you'll see that the type of that exception is Firebase auth exception. All right. So what we need to do now is to go to our code and handle Firebase auth exceptions, not just any exception as we're doing here, because we're catching any exception. So what we want to do is to catch Firebase auth exceptions in our catch block, all right? And a way to do that is I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to do like we were doing before, get rid of the console so you see more of the code. So what you could do, you can have specialized catch blocks in Dart. And that means that you are not catching everything, but you tell Dart that, look, in this particular catch block, I'm interested only in exceptions of this type. And as you might have guessed then already, a try block can be accompanied by more than one catch block. This catch block that you can see here is called catch all. It catches every exception that might occur in the running of the code inside the try block. However, if you're interested in specific exceptions, in this case, Firebase auth exception, I believe, oh, I've cleared it, but I think it was Firebase auth exception. I'm going to run it again. Go to the login button and you can see it says Firebase auth exception. So we're interested specifically in that. So let's go and say, tell Dart that we're interested in that. I'm going to say on Firebase auth exception catch E. All right. So this is the format of catching specific exceptions. You prefix your catch statement with the keyword on, and then you write the type, the runtime type, or the class name of the type of exception that you're interested in handling. All right. So in this case, we said on Firebase auth exception catchy, and we're going to remove this catch from there. And we're going to go here. Actually, I don't even have to cut. And what you'll need to do in here, just say print e code. You see, save this before I tell you what I was going to say after you see. Let's test this. Let's say log in, and you'll see that the code is user not found. So now that we told Dart that we're specializing in catching exceptions of Firebase auth exception, then this E is not an object anymore, really. Let's see if we can get some help. Now it says, okay, if I can catch exceptions of Firebase auth exception, then I know that the error that I can pass to you is of that type. Now that you catching Firebase auth exception, you can go to its code and you see there are different properties that you can read from: message, code, email, credential, etc., etc. Okay. So we're now interested in the code. So as the caption right here shows at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that we need to handle e code equal to user not found. All right. So let's say if e code is equal to user not found, then let's say print user not found, like that. Else e code, oh, sorry, actually, we're not going to do that. Else I'm kind of like running ahead of myself a little bit there. So we have now e code user not found, and then we're just saying print user not found. Okay, I'm going to clear the logs here, go back to strcpy here, and I'm just going to say login. And you'll see all it does is says user not found. All right. So, so that's that. We haven't really, I mean, the caption at the bottom left of the screen says handle, but depending on your background, you may expect handle to do different things. For a seasoned software engineer, handle may actually mean that, well, do something about it. Okay, tell the user, like, oh, I couldn't log in, the user couldn't be found, or whatever reason, just show something to the user. And we could do that, but at the moment we don't have the capacity to do that. We don't really know how to handle that. So what we need to do then is to simply say print. So we just print it to the screen. So this is our handling for now. Okay, it's very simple. All it does is just ensures that no exception is thrown to the user's face, or that the application doesn't crash. Okay, that was a lot of information. Now, as the caption here shows, in the login view, we also need to handle wrong password. And I mean, as you can see here, the E code is a string. So anything here could happen that could be defined by a string. And one of the, excuse me, one of those errors actually is wrong password. So let's test that. In here, let's say else, if the code is not user not found, just print something else happened, and then print the errors code to the screen. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to then go here and then actually change this email to an existing email, which was the one that I registered. And password, I believe, was foobar or something. Is it foobar? Maybe. And I'm going to say login. And you can see here, it says now something else happened, wrong password. So that could kind of mean that, well, yeah, actually that isn't my password. It says foobar wasn't my password. I don't even remember what it was. Maybe it was foobar bass. But that is great. It says something else happened, an E code. And that's exactly what we have to, sorry about that. And that is exactly what we need to handle here. Wrong password. So in your else statement, say else if E code is wrong password, then we're going to say print wrong password. Okay. Manage. So that's there. Clear the logs. And I'm going to say login. And you'll see the message wrong password printed to the screen. All right. A lot of work. We've done quite a lot of work now in the login view, but we haven't really put much energy into the register view. You see, they're very similar in that they do almost the same API calls, with the email and password. One says sign in, the other one says register. However, if we go to our main Dart file, you'll see in here in our register view, we're just calling the API and kind of like hoping for the best. There's no try catch statement here, okay? So what we could do is have a look at how we did it for login. We put the API call inside the try block, you see? What we need to do is to go to main Dart, and for our register view, here, register view state, do the same thing. Let's put this in a try block here. Here we got, okay? And then just say catch, or say on Firebase auth exception, catch E. So this is, I mean, I'm not going to explain this again because it's exactly what we did just in the login view. And I believe Firebase auth exception didn't really exist in this Dart file before, but that is what Visual Studio Code helped me with. As I typed it and pressed enter for auto completion, then it must have been imported somewhere. Or it was probably part of Firebase auth Dart, I believe, actually. So if I command click on it, it goes to Firebase auth. So that's why it probably didn't have to import anything, because it was already imported as part of Firebase auth. Okay. Oh, wow, that was a lot of information also. Now that we're working on the register view, let's go to our main function here. And since we're only seeing the login view, let's switch this back to register view. And Command S, but this is not going to change anything. As you remember, hot reload doesn't have an effect of any changes that it doesn't have an effect on anything that you change in the main function. Remember that you have to hot restart, okay? So hot restart, now we are in the register view, and we need to now handle wrong password. Actually, no, that's not the login view. Sorry about that. Now we need to handle this weak password. So as you're working with Firebase, you will notice that it has its own set of security rules. You also can override these security rules later for your server if you want to. For instance, you can expect, you can say all my users have to have passwords that are 18 characters long and a mixture of digits and alphanumerical values, etc., etc. But there are some default security rules set up on Firebase for credentials that every user needs to abide by. So let's actually have a look at that, and let's do a print here. And I'm going to say print E code, okay? And as you'll see in the caption, as you're seeing in the caption, there is an E code of equal to weak password that needs to be handled. So I'm going to go here, try to register a user with my personal email and the password of ABC. All right. Then I'm going to bring up the console, clear the console a little bit. I'm going to do this so you'll see it a little bit better. Then I'm going to try to register with a password of ABC. Press register. What happened? Here. You see, the code was weak password. And as you'll expect, yeah, weak password, that is too weak a password to even be used anywhere. So what we need to do here is to handle the weak password error, basically. I'm gonna take in my notes that I've talked about some other topics of login. All right, so we'll handle weak password the way we handled the other errors in login view. Then say if E code is equal to weak password, and let's just say print weak password, okay? And we'll say, so that's that for now, okay? And I'm going to just bring up the debug console again and press the register button one more time. Now you'll see the information. Let me bring it so you can actually see it. Yeah, you can actually see it. Great. You can see weak password being printed here. All right, so that was great. Now let's go. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger. The next thing we have to handle is in this register view, as you can see in the caption here, you can also get an error called email already in use. So if you go to the else statement here again and print the E, if I try to register with the same email that I'd registered before, this user already exists, and even if I have quite a good password for this user, so I'm going to say foobarbas 1029 dot, so we know that the error is not going to be the password, like it's actually a good password. Well, better than foobarbas at least, and then or ABC. So I'm just going to say register, and Do we not get any value here? Did I even press the register button? Is it really registering Pixality AB? No, I don't think so. Um, oh, I hadn't saved the file. Oops. So yeah, I hadn't saved my changes. I'm gonna say register. Oh, now it says email already in use, and that is exactly. I mean, that is pretty much what we have to handle, right? Because we're printing e. So I didn't have to say, oh, no surprises there. So let's handle email already in use. So I'm going to copy this email already in use string, just exactly as it's mentioned here. And I'm going to go to else and say, else if eCode is equal to that string. And then say, email is already in use. Okay. And then save it there. Clear the logs, press the register button again. You can see now it says email is already in use. Okay. So let me also have a little bit of a look at my notes. I can also, I mean, to be honest with you, in the notes, I don't see anywhere that we're really trying to handle these errors, like actually doing something about them. All right. So perhaps a better thing to do would be to really like show a message or something to the user. And I'm kind of wondering that right now, like whether that's a good idea or a bad idea for this chapter. And perhaps just doing a print will suffice, to be honest with you. Not entirely sure about that. So um, let's leave it at that for now. Okay. I'm also going to go here and make sure that I'm in do not disturb. So let's leave it at that. Email already in use. Perfect. Okay. Let's leave it at that. Now, the next thing that we have to handle, there could also arise a situation where the user tries to enter an invalid email. All right. So let's put an else statement here and say print e code again, save it. Let's go and remove this @ sign so it becomes an invalid email and try to press the register button. Okay. Now you can see, you can't actually see. Now you can see at the bottom in the logs, it says invalid email. And that is the code for that error. So let's handle invalid email now. All right. So I'm going to go here and say else if e code equal to invalid email. Then we're going to say print invalid email entered. All right. And save it. So clear the logs, tap the register button, and now you'll see invalid email entered. Okay. So, I mean, that's really all we have to do right now for our error handling. And as we're going on, I mean, to be honest with you, I still have a little bit of time to figure out whether we're really going to handle these things and by that, I mean, like if we need to display some error to the user. Okay. And we may need to do that, but it is a little bit complicated. Like, depending on how we want to handle it, do we want to show like a message to the user? Do we want to show a toast to the user? Or do we want to like display another screen to the user? And that's kind of like unclear even to me right now. So maybe we'll iron these things out then as we go on in the upcoming chapters as well. So now I can see here that login, we've talked about that. And what we need to do then in order to be able to carry on with the upcoming chapters is actually to make sure that we are logged in to the application. You see, we've worked on the register view, we've worked on the login view. We're trying like so many different combinations here to register new user login. So I personally don't know at the moment whether this application Firebase instance actually has a logged in user. And if you're familiar with like Python, Django, or Flask, or if you're doing Node.js or whatever development, like backend development, you can be a logged in user, but still end up being in a login view. So if you send a logged in user to a login view, doesn't mean that the user isn't logged in. Instead, it means, well, that user is logged in, but may want to log in as a different user. So that is the case in our application as well. We have a register screen, a login view, but I personally don't know what the state of the application at the moment is. Are we logged in or are we not logged in? Because we're kind of like playing with different views here. Okay. So that's very important now, because in the next chapter, I can see in chapter 14, we are going to work with, we're working on separating the app initialization from the login and register screens, because you can see at the moment we have this future builder that is initializing Firebase, and it is doing lots of work, comes to snapshots, date done, blah, blah. And we're doing the exact same thing in two views, login view and the register view. So what we need to do is kind of like separate that logic and ensure that we display the correct view depending on what the state of the application is. And before we can then continue or start that chapter, we kind of need to make sure that the current user is logged in. All right. So let's go to our main Dart here, and logged in view is already displayed. So you don't need to worry about this part, import login view. What you need to do now is to make sure that instead of register view, we're displaying the login view. And remember, now we're saving something, changing something in the main function. So hot reload isn't going to work. So you need to do a hot restart. So we'll get to the login view. And let's then enter valid details here. So I'm going to say pixolityab@gmail.com. And I think the password was foo_bar_baz, to be honest. I'm going to press the login button. Poof. All right. And there we got the credentials for this user. Wow, that was a lot of information. I understand that. So what we need to work on now, I'm going to take some stuff in my notes, is, as I mentioned, we need to, for the next chapter, I mean, we're kind of done with this chapter, to be honest with you. We've talked a lot about like exception handling, separated the login view from the register view, but our register view is still in the main Dart. We're gonna fix that soon. But what you need to do before you continue with the next chapter, and just ensure that you're displaying the login view to the user and that you're actually logging in with a valid username and password. This ensures that the Firebase instance that is running in this application right now is going to cache that information locally. On iOS, it's going to cache that information in a secure storage called Keychain. And on Android, I think it's called Shared Preferences or something like that. So that information is going to be securely stored now on that telephone, which for me is an Android telephone right here. And when I restart the application, or even if I like shut down my telephone, restart the telephone, the OS, come back up, that information is already saved on that telephone. So my user is logged in. All right. So just ensure that before you continue with the next chapter, that you've registered the user first and that you've logged in with that user from your application, so that information is cached inside the application. All right. Good. A lot of information. In the next chapter, we're going to separate the app initialization from the login and the register screens. There are only a few steps that we have to do in that chapter. So I don't think that chapter is going to actually be so long. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, whatever you want, chocolate or whatever it is, and I will see you in the next chapter.